So we shall be continuing on Brick Lane in a minute. This is the Financial Times of today, which is the Financial Times of Thursday, the 10th of September 2020. It is following yesterday's Financial Times, where Brandon Lewis admitted what the Financial Times is reporting there. And this is the Financial Times of today, the day after, which is following up that defiance of international law. And we shall be going into this. And just to recap, I have been saying on this channel, but I've been saying long before I got into this online streaming, that the UK, I said in the run-up to the so-called referendum in June 2016, and I'm the only one that I know that has been saying it. Well, others have said, but to a much less rigorous and consistent extent. I had been saying that the Brexit, whatever motivated its staging, was an attack on the international legal obligations by the UK. And it is so important, so central, that everything that has happened in denouncing the EU has been actually an attack on other things, nothing to do with the EU. All the international idea, or the idea of UK being an active signatory to and an active member of international treaties, charters, conventions, declarations, all of those were being attacked by the Brexiteers under cover of Brexit. Take a pause and think about this. And they say that the European Union, the EU, was to blame for all those things. Now, it wasn't. But they used the EU as a thing to beat the international treaties and declarations and charters and conventions with. And I'll tell you why I said that. Because in the narratives that I had been having to study for decades before that, the racist resurgence was very much in the offing. It was ready, and it was kind of impatient to explode and burst. So anyone who says that Tommy Robinson is the racist, and John Tyndall and others, is only partially accurate. It is the entirety of the establishment, the institutions, so-called British, essentially little English institutions, that were racist and that were impatient and that were disappointed at the defeat of the Nazis and the fascists. So that is something that I have been watching and observing, and I've been talking about. And when the Brexit thing came, everyone blames, and on the face of it, it was correct that it was David Cameron that caused the Brexit stunt. But even if he didn't, and even if there wasn't a referendum, something else would happen that would allow all the forces of darkness and evil and racism and imperialism and lawlessness of the real English darkness jungle. They say Calais has been a migrant jungle. That has not been. It is the little English mentality and racism that has been the deep jungle. So I have been saying this for years before the Brexit thing was staged, but especially during the Brexit thing, I said it more pronouncedly. And I also pronouncedly noticed that no commentator, not a single one in the so-called Fleet Street or the BBC or the Sky or anywhere else, and none from any academics, said what I was saying. They may have thought about this, they may have understood some of it or most of it or parts of it, but they never said it. And it was not said by a single Labour Party member of Parliament or even by Andrew Adonis, the one that made such a play of being the quote peer that was against Brexit. Mandelson, who another one, none of them. Not even their revived priest. Well, the revived priest has been on the kind of platforms more increasingly or incessantly in the aftermath of the defeat to the ultra-right in the Conservative Party in Parliament, the defeat that Theresa May suffered. Tony Blair. Even Tony Blair, supposedly a licensed law trader, failed and is still failing to grasp the international legal framework that I have been outlining and talking about. So therefore, what is happening today in the Financial Times, for example, saying that Johnson is accused of Brexit now there with threat to rewrite EU treaty. Now, that is only one of a series of lies and illegality and law breaking and defiance to the so-called rule of law. All the textbooks in English written about English law, quote, automatically attach this superiority of status and intellectual kind of rigor and fairness to quote English law. I can tell you, whoever you are, and wherever or whenever you are watching this, that that is a myth. And that myth encompasses, contains the lot, everything in the myth of English education, English academies, and all the rest of it. And that was the case long, long before the algorithm and the theft of the grade took place just in the last few weeks. So there is an emptiness. When I say emptiness, I mean there is an emptiness of substance in the British political arena, social arena, intellectual arena, public arena, which is why the idea of public service is under attack. And anything that enhances or in any way justifies and supports public service or society is targeted for attack by the resurgent racist forces of darkness, Little Englanders. And that is why they attacked the EU, because the EU was the only organization in a kind of a compact form in terms of the directives that it had the right to issue and all the other things, the contractual duties and obligations, and despite the fact that there was an option of derogation. Now, derogation is an option to not agree with everything in an agreement. So we can say, I'm opting out of this particular provision. You cannot opt out of the whole of it, but you can opt out a part or parts of it. So when they said that they were against the Human Rights Act, I mean, the EU did not create the Human Rights Act. And yet that is what the sloganeers of Brexit have said. And nobody, no academic, no media, no Labour Party politician in any house even noticed this, or at least has shown that they've noticed it. So, this is my update on the illegality, which I have been the author of the original commentary about the illegality in serial illegality in serial UK government's behavior. And this should be contrasted with the utter dismal silence of the members of the Security Council, members of the General Assembly of the United Nations, and members of the other countries' representatives of the United Nations. Because all of these things have been happening. If I can see them, they can see them, but no, there has been no outrage, no comment, let alone condemnation. Which is why, in the international arena, for example, when Burma massacred these people, and it has been now confirmed that even Burmese soldiers are now beginning to admit that they were under orders to shoot Muslim children, Rohingya, babies, mothers, women, and children, and other people on site, shoot on site. So Aung San Suu Kyi is a beneficiary of the praise heaped on her by Boris Johnson and his likes. And this is something that needs no further explanation as to the implications of it. So Boris Johnson is saying today, according to in the plug in one of the papers, that his heart is broken. It breaks his heart to say that there will be this problem of what? Long lockdown. Let's see what he's saying, where he's saying it. Or is it the BBC? It probably is the BBC which is saying that untruth. So we'll come to that in a second. And there is this 100 billion pound gamble. This is a gamble. And what is happening is that Boris Johnson has been serially lying for decades. And his father, Stanley Johnson, has been boasting of his sons being clever, as has been his sister, Rachel Johnson. These two are the known public cheerleaders from the Johnson family of Boris Johnson's lying, his racism, his attacks on the Muslims. Now, all of these I'm saying because Boris Johnson also condemned the people of Liverpool and the poor. And yet he is being portrayed today as having someone having a heart. I mean, he says that he's heartbroken. It breaks his heart about the damage that the virus is doing to the people affected by it. And his pandemonium government. So that's a contradiction. And what I'm saying is that this is why it is called diagnosis. Anyone watching this is third part in the short way that I'm doing this morning's editions, because I think it would be better to keep this each part shorter than putting all the contents in one particular volume. So that's what I'm doing. Make it easier for people to access the information, to process the information, and to test the veracity of what I'm saying. And I'm absolutely confirmed in my conviction that I would not say anything on the record or off the record in public or to any person that I have not tested the veracity of myself. I would not expect anyone to tell me something that is not verifiable and objectively verifiable. So Boris Johnson is being lauded by the Daily Express, as I said. Contrary to the headlines in the other papers, the Bieber Brooks poisonous lying organ, somebody would have to do a psychology test about these people who write these headlines and so-called produce this package of garbage called the Daily Express. It is the most insane publication in Fleet Street among the tabloids. And we have got a sucker. This is a sucker on the viewer's right, that is Alok Sharma. He is being given that platform suitably in the insanely, poisonously garbage-filled Daily Express. Alok Sharma is the so-called Brexit regime's business minister, who was the Foreign and Commonwealth Office apologist for Aung San Suu Kyi in the immediate aftermath of the massacre being reported. And he made a number of completely pro-Burmese and pro-Boris Johnson excuses. And it was Boris Johnson who was the occupant in the post of UK Foreign Secretary or Foreign Minister. So he is saying today that new Brexit laws will make us stronger. Now, that is totally, absolutely, completely corrupt and ignorant. There is no new Brexit laws. And what does he mean by make us stronger? When they break the law, how can law breaking make anyone stronger or the lawbreaker stronger? Unless it's a thug's state and it's a thug regime. And every other newspaper is saying that even are being forced to say that the Christmas will be covered by lockdowns and it will be affected by lockdown, whatever the other details. But the Daily Express is saying that the magician, Boris Johnson, will do it and he will save Christmas. And yeah, that's where it is. Well, that is one of the places where he says it breaks his heart. How does he even imagine that he will be treated as having any heart when he gratuitously attacks people, the Muslims and the poor people and the people of Liverpool? And if that is not bad enough, there is a conservative, his MP, who is nominating Donald Trump for the Peace Prize, Nobel Prize. I mean, this is in the Daily Express. I mean, it's not. And they've got in the Daily Express a man called they call him the positive professor. He's the propagandist for Boris Johnson. He's called Professor, it's a man, Carol Sikora. And he's described as CMO of Rutherford Cancer Centers and former director of WHO Cancer Program. And he's a complete sucker for Boris Johnson's line of propaganda. And here is Alok Sharma again being celebrated as the thug, as the law-breaking thug. This is the darkness of the Little England racism that he has entered along with Priti Patel, another of Indian origin, conservative cabinet ministers. So they're out doing the racists and the Little Englanders. And there are absolutely endless items of racism and corruption in this paper. They're not worth discussing because they're absolutely, totally untruthful, dishonest, and shameless. The Daily Express. And the Daily Express today is the kind of counter to the Financial Times of the last 2 days, yesterday and today, where the Financial Times is having to condemn Boris Johnson for declaring that breaking the law is okay. Here is the I newspaper that is admitting, and I shall be talking about that, admitting the rapid rise in infections, especially among younger people. So the line of propaganda at the beginning in March, April was that young people were almost practically immune. Now, they could not be immune. If they had the honesty to admit the facts, they would never have put that line out saying that young people were less likely to be infected than older people. And there was this other thing that they justified. And what the WSWS.org said, the mass murders were done by confecting a number of lying lines. One was that the victims had already been suffering from underlying causes. So they justified the mass murders of the elderly by accusing them of having been unwell with underlying other illnesses. So, in one stroke, they actually destroyed the idea of public service and protecting people and keeping people alive and protecting people from illnesses. And the Labour Party, and even, and that happened before Jeremy Corbyn actually stepped down, and Keir Starmer stepped into his post. There was nothing from the Labour Party in condemning, really condemning and demanding an end to the what the WSWS.org says, mass murders that were happening. And all the other kind of expressions of grief have been kind of retailed afterwards, after the event, as they say, after the horse has bolted, but that is not the real correct analogy. But after the tragedies, after the mass murders had taken place. So if the Labour Party was silent or complicit, what other conclusion to draw except to say that it was a complicit frontage in the face of these mass murders of the elderly and other people. And of course, the two groups that were the most kind of numerically victims of the virus were the people of African and Asian origin. And a significant number of those were employees, either as doctors or as other staff, including nurses in the so-called NHS. I say so-called because the idea of an NHS has been being severely destroyed and undermined under cover of doing deals with the American pharmaceuticals and others who want to scrap the NHS, as do all the Brexiteers. Nigel Farage and others want to abolish the NHS. So when I said earlier that the referendum, the Brexit, was being used as a cover to attack all the things that had made Britain or put Britain on the road to civilization, social care after the 1940s, were being attacked by the forces of racism, darkness, Little Englanders that were given kind of sanctuary, platforms, excuses, pretexts by the Brexit referendum to attack those declarations, charters, agreements, conventions, and obligations. So when the Alok Sharma comes out supporting the breaking of the law, you can then put him in the correct mode, what role he was playing in the immediate aftermath of the massacre being known about the Myanmar massacre of the Rohingyas by Burma. And the only factual conclusion is that Sharma was playing the role of supporting, apologizing for, that is, excusing, acting as an apologist for the massacres, mass murderers of Muslims. So, in that way, Alok Sharma was echoing Narendra Modi. And so, the fact that it is the same Alok Sharma who is now attacking the international legal framework and treaties and others, and promising that the Brexit law will be making Britain stronger. It shows that he is completely signed up to the darkness. And so, therefore, what we have to look for is evidence of light and enlightenment in the politics of this country, and the newspapers are not providing that. We shall be looking at the rest of the papers in a minute. Going back to Brick Lane and what Lutfur Rahman was doing, we shall be looking at those newspapers. Look at the newspapers. These are the ones So these newspapers were being left outside the mosque, Brick Lane Mosque, and they were being left outside the other mosques. And they were called, what are they called? There were the Bangla Times, and one is the one about Muslim, I think. But that one is the only one that wasn't published from an address into our Hamlers. So Lutfur Rahman came outside of the mosque on Friday, the 29th of October 2010. And he was followed by and surrounded by at least 10 people as he came out of the mosque, Brick Lane Mosque. And he greeted me. And he greeted me apparently spontaneously and apparently looking harmless. And on that occasion, I said to him that he should listen to me because the Harmless Council was absolutely full of racists and liars and criminals, and he would be sinking if he didn't behave to stop all the bad things that Harmless Council was doing. And he said that he would settle down first and he would listen and sit down with me. In the 5 years that he was in that post, he never sat down with me to listen to me or look at the evidence. And I shall be updating on those events in due course. So that picture on the corner, on the top right corner, is the image that I have created, montage created based on one image that I took of Luthor on the 29th of October 2010. Now, as I was saying, my concern was that the Bangladeshi community in whose name he sought election, because the majority of the people who were mobilized to vote for him were mobilized based on the Bangladeshi kind of slogan in Tower Hamlets in the election. And Bangladeshi, not necessarily based on any particular political party, but generally from that country and the community based on the origins. So my concern was that he would discredit the community as mayor, and he would bring the community into disrepute. And I did that because I knew that whoever would get the nomination for the winnable kind of nomination, the Labour Party nomination, or in this case it happened, so-called independent, would be a Bangladeshi, given the demography in Tower Hamlets. And given the history of the Bangladeshis politically in terms of doing their job after getting elected, and the Bangladeshis are only got elected starting from 1990s. There was only one or two council ward candidates that got elected before 1990, but they made no difference in terms of the real policies of the council or the narrative. They did make the difference by inserting their names into the local history books, but that is all they did. And the others, like Sadiq Ahmad and Ashik Ali, Nurul Haq and Abbasuddin, these are the four that I can mention were elected before the 1990 election, because the 1990 council election showed the largest number of Bangladeshis getting elected. And they all used this slogan that they were Bangladeshis and they were going to do fantastic things for the community. And as I have said, if they did fantastic things for the community, I have not seen it. And I would like to see what they did and where they did it and what record there exists of their doing these fantastic things. Because it is absolutely vital to see the evidence. Otherwise, that is not substantiated by evidence, so that must not be stated. And the community in Tower Hamlets deserves to be served by elected people, and by community I mean all the people of all backgrounds, even if the councillors may have been, we are talking about the starting point here, the main kind of large numbers getting elected in 1990. Even if the majority were Bangladeshi councillors, they owe equal, unfettered and unlimited obligation and duties to represent the interests of all the people, whether they came from one particular group or another, or whether they voted for them or not. So the people in the Tower Hamlets Council who are now in post and have been in post as councillors various times following various elections since 1990, have not been representing the community. And that is why I said 10 years ago, I said that the clamor for having an elected mayor is going to undermine the community even further. And I meant community in all descriptions, as I have been saying. So when Luthuraman got in, my first task was to take this picture. This was the first occasion, the occasion I'm talking about, the Friday, 29th of October, 2010, in Brick Lane, at the entrance to the Brick Lane Jame Masjid on the Friday. And I chose the time after the end of the Jummah, the Friday congregation prayers. And when he came outside the mosque, he came, because I was there waiting with the camera, and I'm sure his contacts had already alerted him. So he came ready with a smile. Lutfur Rahman, ready with a smile. So that is where the cursor is. Anyone who wants to see this afterwards, they can see that, they can enlarge that, and it's already on the twitter.com/Khudilar account. That picture is there, and also in the Facebook accounts. Khudilar has got several accounts online. And he was ready with a smile. Now I'm saying this for the nth time. I mean, the opposition to the elected mayor thing is for the nth time. And I said that Lutfur Omar was not going to deliver anything better to the community. In fact, he's going to be an instrument to destroy and lower the quality of service that the Towners Council owed to the community. That has happened. But it has happened with my constantly getting engaged and keeping engaged with Lutfur Rahman's regime almost on a daily basis. Almost on a daily basis for that number of years. Nobody, no journalist, no researcher, no investigator, nobody has done that. Nobody could have done that. So I have done that. And the cost and the value are enormous. The cost and the value are enormous. And this will be continued in due course. And I'm ending this part, which is part C of the diagnosis of the media, Fleet Street, at 14 minutes to 9 in the morning GMT on Thursday, the 10th of September 2020. The next edition will be recorded very soon indeed.